Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Melbourne, Australia, where Def Leppard are currently on tour and nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Fingers crossed for that. And we have a gig this evening, but before we head off down to the venue, I have been asked to answer some questions. So here I am, and our boy Lee here, he's gonna ask them, and I'm gonna answer them to the best of my ability. So fire away, Lee.
Before I ask you the questions, Joe, I'm just going to ask you a little bit about some of the other nominees and how you feel about them and some of the music that they've created.
Well, if I can remember them all. Roxy Music, it's a crying shame that they've had to wait 21 years for a nomination, because I remember when Roxy Music burst onto the music scene in 1972 with Virginia Plain, it was a total game changer. But I think the same thing goes with Mark Bolan, to a lesser degree David Bowie, but absolutely Roy Wood and people like that. It's because they're English, and I'm guessing that the majority of the people that vote these musicians in are based in New York or LA, and they've probably never heard of Mark Bolan or Roy Wood, so it's a very American bias towards who gets in. So Roxy Music getting in is a wonderful thing. Todd Rundgren should have been in about 20 years ago. Stevie, I really hope she gets in, because I really like Stevie. Stevie Nicks, that is, of course. MC5, who pretty much, along with Iggy Pop, opened the gateway for punk rock to happen, at least for the New York Dolls, to then influence the Sex Pistols, etc. So I would be voting for them. And I'm actually quite chuffed that Kraftwerk got a nod as well, because at least when it comes to electronic stuff, they definitely paved the way, and that makes a lot more sense to me than, say, rap music belonging in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because I can't ever see Def Leppard in a rap Hall of Fame, and I don't really think rappers should be in rock and roll. So that's just my opinion.
Okay, so Lisa asks, how does the success you're getting now feel? Is it the same as when Pyromania and Hysteria CDs were released and those tours were rocked?
Lisa, hi. It actually feels better to me, to be quite honest, because it's so unexpected. When you're a 20, 21, 22-year-old kid and you've formed a band maybe 2 years earlier, and you're going for what you know, you've watched bands like the Beatles and the Stones and the Who and Led Zeppelin do their thing. First album comes out, then by the fourth album they're huge. Same thing happened really with people like Elton John. And you kind of expect it to happen at some point. When Pyromania took off, we were at an age where, well, this is where it happened for everybody else. And then when Hysteria solidified that, it's like, well, this is kind of what happened to everybody else, albeit there was a 5-year gap between those records, which wouldn't have happened to most artists. So that, I suppose, we took it in our stride because it's what you thought would happen. But for it to come back round 40 years after we formed, and we end up in a situation where the summer of 2018 we're playing stadiums and huge arenas to more people than we'd played to in 1983, makes it that little bit more special. It's kind of like getting a second shot. Even though we didn't split and reform, we've been chiseling away through what we like to call the wilderness years. And I guess there's a bit more heat on the band because people, they reevaluate you over the years, and they start comparing us to what's gone before and since, if you like, because when we started out being successful in the early 80s, we just became our own entity, and then it kind of cooled down a little bit and other bands came along and they've disappeared, and then when we are put side by maybe 90s bands or early 90s bands, I guess people are saying that they think that some of the artists from the 80s, whether it be us or Bon Jovi or Depeche Mode or U2, have got more value because of the longevity and the fact that we weren't work shy, which is, I think, a big part of it.
I've got a few questions from Sean, and he asked one of them, which is, what's the key to a good opening song live from the band these days? What do you feel is a great opener?
It depends on the mood of the band. When we released our last studio album in 2015, I think it was, when we went on tour, we thought it pretty no-brainer to open with Let's Go, because it was a new song and it had a kind of a big dramatic intro to it, and it was a great way of playing a new song, because if you play a new song first, people are still settling into the idea of a show. In fact, some of us are walking down aisles to get to their seats. So you open with something really, really well known, you could actually be wasting the song because maybe people aren't really paying attention yet. So it's a great way of putting a new song in, and it's also good for a band because it's new blood and that makes you feel better rather than just playing hit after hit. Otherwise, it's something that just has a massive intro effect. Women Works is doing at the moment as we're playing Hysteria. Rock Till You Drop is a good opener because it's got the big theatrical front end. Rocket on the last stadium arena tour of the USA was a great opener because we extended the drum loop and made a big deal out of it. So it became tribal and hypnotic, and again that I think focuses people's attention towards the music and the stage. So it all depends on who you are, I suppose. Different bands have got different ways of doing things. I've always thought that when Pink Floyd started off with Shine On You Crazy Diamond, it always worked. When U2 started off with When the Streets Have No Names, it always worked because it just had drama, and after all, that's what a live show should be.
Carl asks, if you were inducted, who would you ask to introduce you into the Hall of Fame?
Very good question. I'm not even going there until we're definitely in. So if we're not in, you're not like shooting yourself in the foot by thinking, well, went out to all this trouble to ask such and such to induct us and we didn't even get invited in. So that's a question that you should ask me the day after if we actually get accepted in. I really haven't thought about it.
Question from Ben, who asks, how does it feel to be nominated for the Hall and join the ranks of such rock legends like Elvis, Kiss, AC/DC, The Stones and CCR?
The list is endless. I mean, who wouldn't want to be in that club, huh? We were always ambivalent, or whatever the word is, about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the past, purely because it was seen by us and a lot of other acts of our ilk to be these faceless committee people behind closed doors that want a certain artist in that club, which we wouldn't be part of that club. You know, the ones that are deemed as credible, the Springsteens and the U2s and the, I don't know, Tom Petty's and the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and stuff like that. They don't want, I don't think they really wanted a Leopard or a Bon Jovi or a Motley Crue in that particular group. But then it gets very interesting when the fan vote becomes a major deal, because even though it's only one vote, it is the one vote that the other, I'm guessing 999 voters can't help but take note of, because in today's social media world, it's in their face day after day through either an email from a colleague going, have you seen who's top of the chart? Or they see it on a website and they're just constantly reminded that a certain band, i.e. this year, us, are running away with the fan vote. So to sum it up, the fact that the fans have got such an important role to play in it makes it way more acceptable for us to want to be in this particular club, because it's our audience that are pushing for us to be in. I don't think it's going to change our lives, but I said that to John Bon Jovi, my very good friend John Bon Jovi, and he said, oh yes, it will. So we'll wait and see on that one if we get in. But the fan vote's the thing that makes me feel it's a worthwhile thing to keep an eye on. You know, but again, it's not till December. Are we even taking it for granted that we're in? Because technically we're not yet.
I've got a great question here from Nick, who asks, if you could go back to 1977, when you first started out, what one piece of advice would you give your younger selves?
Keep doing what you're doing, because you're here still doing it. Ian Hunter once said to me, you don't learn anything from success, you only learn from failure. And I completely agree with that. You can't enjoy winning unless you know how to lose. And everything that we've done has got us to where we are, even the bad stuff. Regrets, yeah, I've had a few, but then again. What would I change? I wish Steve was still alive, even if he wasn't in the band. I wish Rick still had two arms. And that's from a more of a humanistic point of view. From a musical point of view, everything from learning to sing to losing my voice to gaining it back to relaxing into what we are, the fact that we've got this lineup's been together for 26 years. Vivian brought something to the band that we didn't have with Steve. The other four of us and Viv have got a brotherly love that you cannot explain in 2 minutes. We fall out, we fall back in. It's family, you know, even though we're not blood, it is family. So there really isn't a lot that I would change, because we're riding on a wave at the moment. It's higher than we've ever been in 40 years, so why would I want to change anything?
Georgia asks, what does coming home to Sheffield really feel like for you? And what is it that's something you have to do when you get there?
Make sure that my enormous guest list is taken care of. Sheffield is always will be my birth town. It isn't my hometown anymore. It hasn't been since 1981. So we're talking 37 years since I lived in Sheffield. But, you know, like Joe Cocker, like anybody that was born there that moved away, it is always Sheffield. I'm totally grateful for the first 21 years I was there. Some of the gigs I saw that made me want to do what I'm doing, yeah, you could say if I was born in Bradford or London, I would have seen the same gigs. But Sheffield it's where I was. It's where my mates were. All the bits that happened. If I hadn't been in Sheffield, I wouldn't have bumped into Pete Willis, and then we wouldn't have formed this band. So, you know, Sheffield's a very important town in my life. City, I beg your pardon. When we get back there, I was actually asked this last night by somebody, does it feel different when you play Sheffield? It doesn't feel a little bit different, but only because right until the moment you go on, you know your phone's going to be going, I'm outside and our name's not on the list, which happens a lot more than it happens in, say, Memphis or, you know, Orlando or whatever. So there's always a little bit more pressure because you've got family and friends in. But once you get past the first 3 or 4 songs and everything's going smoothly, you kind of forget where you are because you get lost in the moment. And you have to treat every town the same. So you can't do something in Sheffield that you wouldn't do anywhere else. Otherwise, there's a bias that shouldn't exist. But it's always fun to go back to your hometown. And it's a much better place than the one I left. Because the one I left was ruined factories with broken windows. And now it's just some kind of huge big monument to IT. It just seems that there's all the industry's gone away and it's been replaced by other stuff that seems a lot cleaner. And so it's a fun place to walk around when the weather's good.
Okay, got a question from Martha who asks, just wondering if you had any tips for an aspiring rock and roll musician.
Oh, God. Well, depending on how old you are, whatever age you are, I'm guessing you're the correct side of 20, which would be the lower side of it. Starting out let's just say you're 20. Starting out as a 20-year-old in 2018 is a completely different world to starting out as a 20-year-old in 1977, 78 when we started out. So whatever advice, and I hate that word, and I hate giving it out because what works for the goose doesn't necessarily work for the gander. It was so different back then. The roadmap was logical. It was exactly the same as the roadmap from 10 years previous, which wasn't vastly different to the one 10 years previous to that. So, for example, what the roadmap that Elton John followed in 1970 when he kicked off wasn't massively different to the one the Beatles started in 1960, 61, 62. And when we started in 1980, it wasn't vastly different to Elton John's. In other words, you got seen in a club, you got spotted by an A&R man, you got signed to a 6-album deal. That doesn't happen anymore. Nobody expected your first 3 albums to sell, and then you broke big on your 4th album, and then you were off, and you had a 10-year lifespan, maybe. I mean, when we formed, the Stones were 15 years old, and I think they're now 54 years old as a band. There was no roadmap to go, well, you're going to have this career that's going to last 40 years. You maybe thought you'd get 5 or 10 like T-Rex did, or Sweet, or Slade. Nowadays, you're starting off, and you're probably going to... Lily Allen broke out of her basement by just putting a camera on herself, playing an acoustic and singing, and she got a record deal through it. So, you know, it's a different world. The Struts are doing it the old-fashioned way, playing club after club after club after club, but unlike, say, bands back in the 70s, there'd been 4 years between their first and second album. Whereas back in the 70s, you release an album every year. So that proves the point that playing live in front of people is more important than putting out new music. You've got to get across what you have in your catalogue to as many people as possible, which basically means not just playing a 6-week tour of the UK and America and then going back to the studio. You have to go to Japan and Australia, New Zealand and Europe, and that takes time. It's a bigger world than it was when we started out. Advice for inspiring musicians: you just have to follow your heart. Do whatever you think works in this day and age, because I don't know if it would work for us. But what we did in 77, 78 did. But starting out now, the more I think about it, the more difficult I see it is for the Greta Van Fleets of this world and the Struts. But seeing as Greta Van Fleet just went straight into number 3 in the album chart, they must be doing something right. So there's means and ways of doing it. But if you're a rock band, you've got to play in front of people. If you're a one-fingered keyboard player that can write songs and you do it all in your kitchen, that can work too. It just depends what you want.
Okay, got a question from Yvonne, who asks, what stage of your career has been the best?
Honestly, I swear to God, this year. This year has been the best for me because it's not a victory lap, but it's kind of it's reinforcing who we are. And the re-evaluation of this band from the darker side of the music industry, if you like critics that wouldn't necessarily give us the time of day are now at least tipping their hat going, you've got to give them the credit for doing what they do. You don't have to like it, and I'm okay with that. But acceptance, not just by fans, but by people within the industry, it's like rediscovering us and seeing that there is a value there. This has happened to loads of bands in the past. It happened with the Kinks. I remember when Led Zeppelin was still an active band, they were getting torn to shreds in the press. But 30 years after they split up, everybody's worshipping them again. It's just a funny old world, really. What was the question?
So what stage of your career has been the best?
Oh, yeah, this year. This year, again, because like I said earlier on, you know, at this stage in our career, where we're all in our mid to late 50s, the fact that we're doing it in front of so many people with such a good response is a fantastic feeling, because it wasn't expected. So it's kind of like winning the lottery, but I didn't even have to buy a ticket.
Okay, this is a good question from John. If you could be in another band for just one tour or a gig, who would it be and why?
It'll be the Down and Outs, because I've done it and I'm going to do it again, and I love the songs that I just written. That's bad English. I just wrote for the third Down and Outs album, but I can see what you really mean. Is who would I join for about 5 minutes? Mott the Hoople, but that wouldn't be fair on Ian Hunter, so I'd have to really join a band that had a dead singer, so it would be more acceptable. I've done the Cybernauts, but David Bowie was still alive, but the band he was in when he wrote those songs, which is the Ziggy period stuff, he wasn't really doing with that band anymore, so I've kind of done that as it happens. But I suppose if I was walking to a Rolling Stones rehearsal and Mick was having a cup of tea and said, yeah, go on, get up and sing Brown Sugar, I would jump at the chance. Yeah. Stones, Beatles, just the classics. The Who. Roger wouldn't let me, but you know, I'd have a crack at the Who.
It's been a hell of a year. Great tour with Journey. Now we're in Australia. How are you going to look back over this year?
Well, the thing that I'm always looking back right now, and it comes up all the time, because you do have, your brain never shuts off, and you've forever got time between. You're on stage for 2 hours, you've got 22 hours to kill. And when you're not sleeping, you're travelling, or you're sitting around doing stuff. For me, it's like this year has just gone so fast. It's now, what, mid-November nearly? And I was in New York with Neil Schon in January promoting the then Def Leppard Journey tour that we were just announcing. That's 11 months ago. And it doesn't seem like 11 months, so it's like an incredibly fast year. which is scaring me actually, because it basically means that in about 4.5 months' time, I'm going to be 86 years old at this speed, and I don't want to be 86 years old in 4 months' time. Life is going really fast right now, but it's a hell of a ride because, like I said, the success that we've re-achieved this year, or solidified, has been quite astonishing, and we're humbled by it. We accept all the hardships that come along with it, because it's not as easy to tour, and sing these melodies that we wrote when we were 22, and you physically have to still keep doing them 30 odd years later. It's a challenge and it's a commitment, but it's one that we've never shied away from. We've always been hard workers. We're not millennials that expect everything handed on a plate or get a medal for finishing 10th out of a race of 10 people. We know that you've got to work really hard for what you want and what you expect to achieve, and we've done that this year, and it's quite exhausting at times, but it's very rewarding, so no complaints. Been a good year.
Have you any highlights out of this year? Anything particular, anything memorable?
Yeah, usual ones. People like us get off on a big crowd. So Denver, because there was 50,000 people in a stadium in Denver, and it was a beautiful night, and it was just the way that the stadium's lit. There's this band of like light around the edge of the balcony thing, the top tier. This actually registers that that's exactly 1 mile above sea level. And it's just little things like that. You go like, wow, this is really wild. This is crazy, There's also been, gone to Japan, been in Hawaii for the week, rehearsing the Hysteria stuff. That was a highlight, because we all had family out, and we actually got to live like human beings rather than just cattle, being prodded from one place to another. We settled down for 7 days in a hotel on a beach, and we purposely set up to rehearse in the evenings so we could spend all day with our kin and swim in the sea and mess around and stuff and have a laugh and do it together as a group. You see, when you're working, you don't really have that much time to relax because you're always working. And we actually had a bit of time where everybody was with their people and we had fun as well as worked. And we don't get to do that very often because we don't all live in the same, not even the same city. We don't even live in the same country. So for us to be able to do that was pretty special.
That leads nicely to a question from Deborah, who asks, for each of the guys, what are the favourite things you like to do to relax while you're on tour?
Oh, madam.
That's besides spending time with your family, of course.
Yes. Good question. I can't really answer for the other four guys, but briefly, let me just think. Vivian loves to sit in front of his laptop looking at car porn. He is a car porn fanatic. He likes looking at old cars, so that's what Viv does, and drinks red wine. What is Rick? Rick is doing artwork, so he's prepping a lot of artwork that he's going to do when he gets home, picking certain things that he wants to paint. Sav is forever on one of 3 phones, checking what's going on at Hillsborough, which is Sheffield Wednesday's football team, and staying in touch with his family. Phil gets up really early in the mornings and goes and finds the local Starbucks and talks to all the locals and figures out what's going on in whichever town we're in. So he's like our social network guru, if you like. I love just laying on my mattress all day long, doing absolutely nothing except listening to music. And right now I'm having a complete jazz fest, listening to Miles Davis and John Coltrane from 1960 in Copenhagen, the last time they toured together. It's one of the best jazz records you'll ever hear. Now, I know you think this is weird. Why is he listening to jazz? Well, when you do what I do in the evenings, I don't technically want to listen to it all day long either. Now, yes, there are exceptions like the new Greta Van Fleet and the new Struts and the occasional UFO and Thin Lizzy record. But generally speaking, other than putting stuff together for my Planet Rock radio show and my Sirius radio show, I tend to listen to things a bit more off the wall. So if it's within the rock boundaries, it would be Kate Bush and Steve Wilson and Jethro Tull and maybe some Sonny Rollins and a bit more bluesy stuff, just to change it up a little bit. That's what I do, and I drink lots of tea. So
we're coming to the end now, Joe. Anything you want to say and talk about where we are next?
Where we are next? Well, we're in Melbourne, Australia right now. It's a great tour. Australia is technically bigger than America, but there's only about 12 cities, of which we're only playing 6, because some of them are absolutely impossible to get to. So we started in Perth, and then we went to Adelaide, Brisbane. We're now in Melbourne. We have a day off tomorrow. Everything gets gig day off, gig day off, gig day off. This is an amazing thing for a singer. You get to rest up every other day. And then after Sydney, which is, what day is it today? It's the time.
Thursday.
Time zones are messing me up. It's Thursday. We have a gig in Sydney on Saturday, and then we fly to Auckland in New Zealand for a gig on Monday. And then we have 2 weeks off before we fire up for the Irish UK tour, which starts in Dublin December the 1st. So that's when that finishes at Wembley Arena on the 18th of December, and then we're done. D-U-N. Done. Slade spelling. You'll get it. Go look at their album covers.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for giving your time.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Is there any questions down at the bottom? Let me just see if there's any more down here. They're going too fast. She loves me. Thank you. Miss your name. Sorry. Yeah, that's good. Thank you for being me. Yep, nice. I can't be anybody else. So you guys in... Oh, no. We'll do it too fast. Yeah, they're not questions, they're just statements. Thank you. Thank you for your support for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and all that kind of stuff. Love you guys. See you out there somewhere.